Okay, we'll begin live stream in 10 seconds.
Live stream's on now. We're good to go.
Oh, we're good to go. Okay. Thank you. Well, welcome everyone to this meeting of the Infrastructure and Projects Committee. We are beginning on time, but the chair has not quite arrived, so I will take the chair until Grant Dermody gets here, and then I'll hand the chair over to him. We have Jonathan Shaw on Zoom, I believe. I don't see him, but he will join us. We have apologies from Councillor Broad and Mrs. Coote. Does anyone have any declaration of interest? Okay, we have no public forum. Oh, I'm sorry, apologies. I always forget that. Okay, thank you, and seconded Barry. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. We have no public forum today, so we'll move to the minutes of the Waste Advisory Group meeting held on the 17th of February.
I'll move that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pottinger. Will somebody second?
I can second it, Pro Forma.
Seconder, please. Thank you. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. We have the minutes of the Infrastructure and Projects Committee meeting held on the 1st of April. I will move those. Somebody second.
Mr. Chair, I've just got a question. I've just got a question for clarification from those minutes.
Sure.
It's on page 10 in relation to the total mobility scheme. And since Doug is here, he may be able to update us. On the 1st of April, there was reference in the report on the 1st of April to the increase in usage and the triggering of that partly by the providers who were not charging the 25% since the 75% subsidy had gone on. There were several referrals from submitters to the annual plan on that very issue. Doug had indicated in the 1st of April report that we would be able to amend the contracts to instruct the providers to make a charge. I just wondered if Doug was able to update us on that action.
Okay, thank you.
Kia ora, through you, Chair. Yes, we're working through that process at the moment. The contracts haven't been updated since 2018, and they're only 12-month contracts, so we've really got a body of work to go with us. That's our intention. I've had discussions.
Doug, could I ask you just to pull the microphone a little closer?
It's about to be in my mouth, hang on. We've been working with NZTA as well, just to confirm the moves we're making are palatable for them as well. And the other strand we're looking at is a reduction in the 25% subsidy, which was a top-up subsidy that came out of COVID originally. So we're working quite hard on that. The contracts themselves, they're long overdue, so we'll be rewriting them completely and adding the requirement to charge a fare to the client.
Thank you.
Thank you. Doug, can you just confirm, because a lot of the feedback to the annual plan, including from those in the disabilities community, was that they did not expect ever that the scheme would be free, and were certainly prepared as part of the scheme to pay a share of the cost, and were surprised not to be charged. Can you confirm we do definitely have the ability to amend the contract to insist that the providers do make the charge?
Yes, through you, Chair. Yes, we do have that ability because all the contracts have expired in real terms. So we need to revisit them and review them. The feedback I've had from the disability community is exactly as you've received, Councillor, which is that they never expected free, and there was a certain willingness by their representatives to face a charge of some sort.
And of course it's not free, although some people are referring to it that way, because the 75% subsidy is clearly being paid by a combination of the Invercargill City Council and the government.
Through you, Chair, that's the word free, and somebody is picking up the bill somewhere. Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification, Doug. Do you expect that amendment can happen quite quickly?
In terms of the contract, we still need to enter into negotiations with all the operators, so I have to have individual contracts for each operator. We don't have a generic one as such, but those negotiations need to be ongoing. It will be done probably within 4 to 6 weeks.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. That
Thank
was
you, Mr.
helpful
Chair.
clarification, so thanks for that. So you've moved that we receive the...
I'll second your
Oh, you've
move. I'll
seconded.
second
So
the
you did.
minutes now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those... Oh, pardon me. McClark.
Through you, Chair, on the same issue, which is the total mobility contracts, I think it would be unwise for us to amend our local contracts if other cities or other areas were not amending accordingly. I think that would put us out of line with some of the disability organisations that we have in town that have national bodies that would see us moving and others not. I've done some work in the last week or so about this whole issue, and it begs the question why a provider would not recover the 25% from the client, and the simple answer to that is it's better to have multiple 75% incomes than to have fewer 100% incomes. So the moment you remove the client participation, then there's an incentive that the client can just use it at will, and that's what we're facing. But it's a national-wide problem, it seems. It's not just here.
Okay. Yes. Bear in mind we're only receiving the minutes.
Yeah. Sure.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, but I just wanted to clarify, when submitters were asked, disability community submitters were asked if they were aware of the issue with the providers happening anywhere else nationwide, they indicated that their organisations weren't aware that that perverse issue was happening anywhere else. So it may be that we need to investigate whether in fact it is, or whether it's a unique situation for our region.
Doug.
Through you, Chair. It is a national problem. The feedback they may not be getting straight to them. We have a national group of which I'm part of, trying to work through these issues, and this is the approach that most are looking to take. Yeah, it is a national problem, but I'm not sure that other regions have actually communicated that to their communities. So it could be that.
Thanks for that.
Okay. So we are receiving the minutes. So we've had a mover and a seconder. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. So the chairman has arrived. So Grant, do you want to take over, or do you want to... Okay. So we'll have a 2-minute adjournment just for the chairs to swap over in good order. Thank you.
Okay. Apologies for that, everyone. So yeah, we will continue on with the meeting. Just noting that we will go with the agenda that's distributed on board books. So the next item will be the temporary road closure and deal with the road closures both for the food festival and also the Great South request, and then the parking exemption policy and the water service delivery model, and then the notice of motion will be at the end.
Excuse me, Chair, there are some recommendations to council. Were they basically approved with the minutes as they are, or?
The minutes to the meeting you've just gone through?
Yes,
Yes.
so the minutes.
I can just check with the mover and seconder that they're happy with those. Yes, Leslie was. Yep.
So, Mr Chair, those recommendations to council were received by council at the April meeting and were made by council at the time. This is simply a reflection of the minutes that were from that meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, still working. Okay, so item 6, Doug, welcome.
Thank you, Mr Chair. This application is for a temporary road closure for the Bluff Oyster Festival. This is the annual event, obviously. 24th of May, the closure is for 12 hours from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. for the activity occurring between those hours, 10:30 till 5.
Move the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Any discussion on those? No, there being none. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. And then the second one, Doug?
Thank you, Mr Chair. The second one is for an event called Flames on S Street. I actually had to look this one up. So it's some fire displays and, quote, fairies running along the street. So it's a bit of a family day. I'm hoping there's fire breathers and so on. But they're using S Street, which is really good. And the road will be closed between 4:30 and 10 p.m. for an activity 6 till 8:30. So obviously you wanted to look for the darkness. Very comfortable with what their approach is.
I'll move the recommendations, Mr Chair.
Thanks, Leslie, and seconded Barry. Any discussion? No, there being none. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Doug, this you? No, all right. Parking exemptions policy. Welcome, ladies. Just before you start, I might just ask Erin to sort of talk through why this is coming through this committee versus coming through the policies committee. Just for clarity.
Thank you, Chair. Where a policy relates to a specific area of the business as opposed to being a council-wide, it will come through the relevant committee. I don't know if Rhiannon has anything further that she wants to add to that. In regards to this one specifically coming to infrastructure, this is because the activity owner for parking sits with the infrastructure team, and obviously the regulatory side of it sits separately, but is on behalf of that infrastructure team.
Thank you. Well done. Ladies.
Good afternoon, Mr Chair. Good afternoon, councillors. I've been asked to speak briefly to this report. I'd just like to begin by highlighting, please, we need to make an amendment to the text of the draft policy, specifically under vehicles on council business, which you'll find on page 6 of the draft policy. This is as it relates to parking for elected members. We received some feedback from a member of the public that the wording here could have been a little confusing about the extent of parking provided for elected members. So we're suggesting amending that second paragraph in the policy after the brackets should instead read, basically the councillors are entitled to use the designated free parking spaces at Te Hinaki Civic Building for the duration of those activities, which, as you know, is exactly the current arrangements that you all use. No changes are suggested to that. We're just rewording it to make it very clear. And to reiterate, that section of the policy in general has been included here for completeness and for transparency. It's not changing or seeking to change any existing practice. Otherwise, I will take the report as read. I'll just emphasise that the aim of this draft policy really is to consolidate and update the 2 existing parking exemptions policies that we have that were due for review, and also to formalise some existing informal practice and sort of codify it and put it into a public-facing policy. But again, there's not really much by way of a novel approach or new arrangements being suggested. But otherwise, very happy to take any questions.
Okay, questions. Councillor Pottinger.
Thank you, Chair. Look, my question is around it's listed here as guest parking. Now, we've had last week and the week before, we've had good examples of both submitters who come along on council business for the annual plan, and we also had an example of public forum where Nigel Hewitson came in to speak. Now, are they exempt? Are they allowed exemptions to park? And the process, because obviously if they are, the catch is they've got to park somewhere, then come to the front desk, get their exemption, and then, like, it's a bit messy. Or are we best advising those people, this is where you park? Go to this block of car parks, like across the road, or whatever. So what's the practice?
Through you, Mr. Chair, first of all, to answer part of your question, the suggestion in the policy is that all permits have to be arranged in advance rather than someone being able to come to the front desk and back. Second of all, it's worded with a degree of discretion. It's aimed really at people who have been invited to council for issues, for things such as a meeting with a general manager, or perhaps with the mayor, or to come for a workshop. Those people who've been specifically invited, and it's also suggested to have a limited number of permits rather than it being a free-for-all. That said, it's drafted widely enough that someone who was coming to a public forum perhaps would be able to get one of those permits, but there is a priority built in for visitors who are meeting with the mayor, a member of the executive leadership team or corporate management team. But it is a fair point about suggesting where people park, but I'm pretty sure our customer services team do that already. But this would be a sort of a separate thing for visitors and guests, really.
So if I have someone like Nigel last week ask me, where do I park, what would I have told him?
And listen wants to correct me.
I think through you, Chair, there are always going to be circumstances that are particular. The governance team, in the example that you've raised, always engage with those members that are coming for public forum. That's a standard part of their processes, and I'm sure that was something that they would consider following the adoption of this policy, should council choose to adopt it today. But absolutely, some of those logistical things would be worked through for all circumstances.
Thank you.
Tom.
Thank you. I was surprised to read of the recognition of services part of it. I was completely unaware of that. How many of those have been awarded, or how many are currently in place at this point? Are there any at all?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I slightly misspoke when I said that we're not suggesting much by way of novel approach. This would be a new thing. I believe quite a long time ago there were similar provisions for I think former councillors and that sort of thing. But this would be a new discretion, which is really there on the off chance that it's recognised as a meaningful thing to do for somebody who had given significant service. It's really an extension of the existing special circumstances exemptions. So currently there are none that I'm aware of, because this would be a slightly new thing. The discretion would be left to the chief executive. It was suggested that it's appropriate at that level, and it is not expected that this would be a frequent thing, but it sort of provides a discretion if that were felt to be an appropriate way of recognising somebody.
I think when you have a system like that provides special privilege to an individual, you really need to have some kind of nominations process for it. I think to leave it just completely to the chief executive or to the mayor, I suppose, who could nominate just on the basis of it having occurred to them, I think it seems to me to be, inappropriate. It feels very elitist, but I mean, it might be appropriate, for example, for someone who receives a civic award, for example, something like that might be, you know, a trigger that,
Yes.
that those would be considered. But leaving it completely the way it is at the moment just feels to me to be a little inappropriate, actually.
Rhiannon?
Based on that feedback through you, Chair, then perhaps the committee might choose to make an amendment to the policy for consultation on that matter and require confirmation by council.
Yep, I'd agree with that.
Well, if you're looking for additional words, I think what should be consulted on is how such an individual should be identified.
Yep.
You know.
So do you want that recorded in the minutes of this, or are you going to record it for noting? Rhiannon?
We can note that.
Yep, okay, thank you. Leslie?
Thanks, Mr Chair. Like the Deputy Mayor, I was a bit surprised to see this one here and the wide implications after we had very consciously removed the privilege for former councillors that existed, etc. I'm more inclined of the feeling that we should take this out altogether. I think the rarity of providing a parking exemption as a gesture of goodwill to a person who has provided significant service to Invercargill City or Council, it would be such a rare and odd thing to do and imply that it had a value that provided some important recognition. I just feel that we probably are better to remove it altogether.
On the contrary, though, it gives, you know, like to the civic awards that we've just reintroduced, it gives further sort of acknowledgement and, want a better term, value to those awards, doesn't it, if they do get granted sort of that right, albeit that there won't be very many of them.
Well, there could be, of course.
Yeah. Anyway, we can put it out for consultation. Darren?
Exactly that point, Chair. I think it's happy enough leaving it in at the moment with the comments that Councillor Campbell made, bearing in mind that it's only going out for consultation at this point. So that's adopted as feedback, and if people aren't comfortable with it, then they can submit against it.
Yeah. And to that point, just coming back to the point that Councillor Pottinger made, so I think Rangi, correct me if I'm wrong, what I heard you say was when someone's coming to public forum, you know, what's the ability for them to park across the road, you know, and then give their registration number and they get to park there. My sense is I think that's a good thing. It sort of reinforces those sort of tenets of democracy where, you know, remove the barriers for people to come and present to us. Obviously, the conundrum might be if you get a group of people, but I think if you restrict it to those that are actually presenting to us, I think that just gives good recognition to encouraging our public to come talk to us in public forum. It just removes, you know, a small barrier, but could be quite significant, you know, for them. So I'd like to see that reflected in the policy for consultation too, or like to hear what the committee's view on that is. But I think that just sits well with me in terms of that tenet of democracy. Rhea?
Thank you, Mr Chair. I actually support your view on that. When we had previous public forum speakers with the Stanton Road situation, he parked in there and then I can't remember which council it was, but advised him to park somewhere else away, which could have made him late to the public forum. So I think there does need to be some sort of, when they're registering to come here, then the operational side of council will actually kick into motion.
Yeah. Rhiannon?
So through you, Chair, yes, the policy as written allows for that, and that would be a process element behind the scenes, and I can see that Michael Morris is nodding that isn't certainly how the governance team would utilise the policy.
Okay. So that's how you see the policy getting into effect. Okay. Right. Yeah. Thank you. Alan?
Yeah, through you, Chair. I support that as well, but I was just thinking that if you have like we've got councillor parks allocated just for councillors, but we're thirdly here mostly only for one day. So if you take a whole lot of parks out of the public domain, you know, there's a lot of parks here that could be available to the public at other times. So would it be better to use some sort of card system or something as opposed to having allocated parks? So they could actually park anywhere. So they might somehow pick up a card, they stick it on their dash or something. I'm not sure. I just see that there's a lot of parks here that aren't used because we get them allocated to us once a week.
So what are you saying there? So remove the parks that are along the WA building in terms of councils will just park anywhere in that park and then
Yep.
that frees up that space?
Yep.
Is that what you're
And we
suggesting?
do it by via registration or something. Because if you take another, say, 10 parks out for submitters, suddenly you've got 20, 30 parks.
Yeah, you could do, yeah.
It's just a thought. It's more of a management thing I'm talking about as opposed to
Yeah.
an actual policy thing.
Might be easy just to keep it as it is. Yeah. I suppose to your point though about a lot of submitters coming, and annual plan would be the example, right, where we know we've got a big group coming to us, albeit they're rolling, we just would plan for that, wouldn't we? So we would better manage that on the basis we know, we don't usually get a number through committees, several submitters unless it's a very specific piece or annual plan. So I'm comfortable just to leave that last piece aside. Yep. No further comments? Okay, so bearing in mind the two discussion points that you've noted, one around the sort of who receives benefit of parking freely in the city, and secondly with the respect to the Councillor Pottinger's query, can I have a mover and second to receive the parking exemption policy and adopt that for consultation? Barry and Ruth, do you want to talk or be seconder? Seconder, thank you. Okay, all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, item 9 on board books, or 10 on the agenda. Water Services Delivery Model Options Deliberation. Welcome, Andrew.
Good day. Afternoon. Right, so just got a copy of the paper in front of us. Purpose of today is to present the outcomes of public consultation on the water service delivery model. 3 options were put to the community as part of the annual plan consultation process. So option 1, council operated enhanced service. Option 2, Invercargill council controlled organisation. And option 3, which is the hypothetical, the Southland-wide council-controlled organisation. So consultation was held alongside the annual plan, so incorporated within the annual plan. Just in terms of summary stats, we had 188 submissions on the water service delivery model options and a response rate of 75%, going with the council's preferred option 1 to maintain in-house. So 3 or 4 supported that the preferred delivery model, and 1 of 4 supported the other, one of the other 2. So we had 14% supporting an ICC council-controlled organisation, standalone, and 11% supporting the Southland hypothetical wider solution. So just in terms of looking at all those submissions, I know that you all sat through hearings, etc. Just want to comment on the quality of the submissions. There is evidence that some people did some deep thinking, and so that was heartening to see. And the level of engagement, it's a big decision. In terms of the pros and cons that we've mapped out in the document, we've just reflected this consultation outcomes, but there was nothing really new out of the, in terms of new items raised, in terms of pros and cons against each of the options. So just really looking for I believe that's my opening comments, and now for decision. Recommendation up to council, where it would then be adopted as a decision. We would then put together the water services delivery plan on that basis.
Okay, discussions. Councillor Pottinger.
My question is around the ring fence one, which I think is the best option, but I can understand you ring fence the finances and the attributed rating to fund it. So everyone understands that it's going to Three Waters. We can't touch that money. It's all good. What about the governance? Is that going to be ring fenced, or does that just spill over from council to govern the in-house three waters? I mean, that's to me is a key thing. Okay, you've got the finances sorted in-house, but what about the governance that make the decisions?
I'll pass to Aaron.
I mean, a classic example is the decision made in December 17 last year about the Bluff wastewater options. So I'm just wondering how would government look at the way we make decisions?
So, in response to that, there has been, as part of that enhanced model, funds put in to bring an independent Three Waters specialist onto council to advise as part of those decisions going forward. We'll need to work through what shape and model that looks like with the new council and once the model's been determined. My initial thoughts are that you wouldn't have all decisions simply going through a separate committee and then obviously up to council to be confirmed. My initial thoughts are that you would run a almost an intensive style of workshops around Three Waters issues to get council, across an issue with the assistance of an independent specialist there as well, and then the decisions would still come back through our infrastructure committee and through to council for final decision. But absolutely there will not be a separate delegation or decision-making body. All decisions will still rest with council. That's really the key element of the in-house model.
And my last question is the infrastructure plans, 30-year plans, stuff like that. Are we still using those models as per the Local Government Act, or will they change, or what's happening there?
So there is, and actually Andrew might want to add some more detail around this, but there's not a requirement for the 30-year infrastructure plans. There is the requirement for the service delivery plan as essentially a bit of an interim model, and then really the regulatory framework will be set by the Commerce Commission in terms of public disclosure documents, and we're just starting to see the framework for what that will look like at the moment. Andrew, do you have anything further to add to that?
Well, there's the water strategy, which that comes into, I can't remember the exact time frame, so it's like the water service delivery plan is the interim strategy document, and then the water strategy will be a recurring deliverable that is then submitted into the DIA, and DIA, I believe.
We're seeing a significant amount of additional documentation that will be required under this model than what we have had previously, right down to things like water catchment management plans, which is not a space that council has previously stepped into. That was really a regional council function. So there is a lot coming in terms of strategies and plans that council will need to develop, primarily in the first 2 years of whichever model we select being up and running.
Okay, no, that's fine. Thanks.
Yeah, and the regulatory framework isn't fully in place, so there's a lot of things that will amend and change as we move forward. Leslie, and then Tom, and then Trish.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. A 75% positive vote from submitters for the council's preferred option, option 1, is I feel very significant in this case, not only because a lot of those submitters did show that they had put quite a bit of thought into the cost implications and the comparisons between the 3 options on the table, but also because of the reasonably high level from those submitters of satisfaction with the council's current delivery, and belief that a council operated enhanced service was only going to improve a good current delivery quality-wise and otherwise, and therefore why would they go for a council-controlled organisation with higher costs, or the Southland-wide council-controlled organisation, which was only a hypothetical option. So I feel quite comfortable, having read through and listened to the submissions, moving the recommendations. I realise there's other speakers, but I'm happy to be recorded as the mover of the recommendations, with 2A being the recommendation. So 1, 2A and 3.
Okay, I'll sit on that. Tom? Thanks, Leslie.
So I support what Leslie's just said, and therefore I would second the motion that she's just made. But picking up on the point that Councillor Pottinger made about governance, I think that's a very important point, actually. And if I can comment on it, I certainly saw the disadvantages of the CCO model as being, firstly, the establishment cost. It was going to be expensive to set it up. And secondly, the fact that it avoids public consultation, which I think is a bad thing. I think it's good that these things go to the public. However, there are benefits in a CCO, and certainly having that independent thinking, specialist thinking that comes from it, would be something that I think that we should try to mirror in that internal model. So I don't quite agree with the way that Erin suggested it might be set up, and I think it's important that we do actually debate the governance structure here.
Yes.
I would personally favour having as independent you cannot call it a committee, as independent a committee as we can, looking after that entity, certainly with some external advisors, probably reporting and making recommendations directly to council rather than via infrastructure. But I mean, I think that's all for debate, but I think the point I was going to make is let's make sure we're having that debate here where, you know, we are about governance and we're going to talk about governance.
Yeah. So just to
But
that...
I've just seconded
yeah, thank you, Tom. So just to that, Erin, so in terms of the decision today, the recommendations for the council, then that opportunity would be there to then formalise some of the sort of workings of whichever way we go?
So in terms of establishing the new model, there wouldn't be an intention that the new operating model would be up and running until 1 July 2026 at the earliest. And we do need to work through in the coming months as to whether that's actually achievable, because that may be a bit too ambitious. What I would say is the committee structure for how council governs the business is always a decision of council. So that would absolutely be the case going forward.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Trish?
In discussions relating to this, we talked about there being a review at some point as to was this the best practice still, or should we consider change once we get into it? Should that be put into this, or is that just part of what we establish when we look at how we establish the governance?
Yeah, I see that as something that would be put in place, you know, as we get closer to that July period where, you know, we did say that, you're right, and I think that's a good, healthy process to have as part of it. And so that would be enacted closer to that July date if that's when it falls into place.
Yes, I wouldn't like to see it lost.
No.
Yes.
No. So, Mayor Clark?
Yeah, just wanted to reinforce that we should do in the initial years, do a yearly review of our internal structure, make sure it's working right for us. What's not in the paper today is that we can at a later stage join another CCO if we want to, and that's not restricted by being a geographical boundary either, so we could, for argument's sake, join with Christchurch if we wanted to, if there was any benefit in that. And the other thing that we need to be mindful of is that a lot of the savings that we potentially will get in any of these models, certainly in our model that we're going to, is the ability to have shared services with other larger cities. So I know at the moment both Christchurch and Dunedin are going to bond together on the shared services, which is not a CCO, and it would be in our advantage, I think, to get into bed with them as well. See if there's an opportunity there for us to do common purchasing, procurement, be able to link in with the larger firms that might be able to provide services to us. Because I think as we go forward, there will be a crunch point where there won't be enough capacity in the industry to get some of this work done. There's just physically not enough capacity there, and therefore the stronger your alliances that you have with some of these other big cities could be advantageous to us.
Yeah, thank you. Got Barry and then Rangi.
Yeah, I totally support Leslie's recommendation. The public obviously trust us on this subject. 75% have gone for the recommendation we want. Yeah, I'm quite happy to
Rangi?
Thanks, Chair. It's also good to know that Dunedin, Christchurch, I think 3 other councils are all doing exactly what we're doing here. But one of the key things I've found talking to some people in Wellington and government is that I was a bit worried that we would be hit like the last 3 waters, where I still remember being told by a young lady Prime Minister that we had the choice to opt in or opt out, and that sort of changed. It's my understanding whichever one we choose, 1, 2 or 3, as long as we do it well, we're good. As soon as they see us, DIA see us not performing, they will intervene. So that is certainly an incentive.
Yeah, and I think they've indicated through the legislative process, that there will be some reasonably rigorous benchmarks or key objectives to meet.
Which is great.
Which is good to go on, so I agree. Yeah. Any further? Oh, Mayor Clark, sorry.
So just adding to Rangi's reservations there, we do have a water regulator now, and the Commerce Commission are both going to oversight our structures and how we operate.
Yeah.
So there'll be very little opportunity for us to underperform. The standards will be pretty rigorous, I would say.
Yeah. No, all good. Okay, look, we've got a mover and a seconder, so thank you for those that have shared their view. So we will put the motion, so 1, 2A being option 1, the council operated enhanced service, and 3, direct staff to prepare the water service delivery plan for council's adoption. So all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you.
Good work.
Righto. Okay, so the next item, which is 10 on board books, but it is noted as 6 on the agenda, is the notice of motion. Michael's just dropping off a paper that I've put together just with some industry information for your reflection. So basically the paper that's just been delivered is an industry, information taken from industry around this topic in terms of fees. So,
Sorry, I can't hear you.
sorry, it's a paper, it's a information I've pulled from an industry body that runs through sort of the background to how fees are calculated, apportioned, and then it's got the breakdown of the Taonua and the wider 1225 project. So
are you putting that we received this?
it's just for your noting, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
When you mention industry bodies, is it an industry relative to carrying out
Yeah,
the
so
work?
it says at the top, it's taken from the Quotable Values Cost Builders Association. Yeah. So, Councillor Pottinger, do you want to speak to your motion and then we'll seek a seconder and move
Yeah,
forward?
so in March, via the Lagoima process, I requested, just for transparency, because I seem to be on the out of what's happening with the museum, and just for a list of expenditure and consultants was the one I looked at first. And so thank you to Patricia for sending me that. And so I have 3 questions resulting from the printout that she sent me. And the first question is a list item that is referred to as Museum Operation Advice. Now, this has a total of $337,000. Now, just I'd love some clarification on that, because I would have assumed that a council would know how to operate a museum. So obviously the wording must be difficult. So that's my first question.
So just if you could go back a little bit and give us some context to, you know, the purpose, if you like, and they're my words, not yours, obviously, to this motion. What is it you're trying to achieve with this motion?
Well, obviously, I voted against the extra expense back in July last year when Council approved the $13 million. Now, I'm very...
What you're entitled to do.
Yeah, I'm very interested in the costs, and obviously I've heard rumours about various costs, legal fees and stuff like this, and I thought, well, I will ask and see them for myself, which is transparent. And after seeing them, I want to ask some questions, and the appropriate place to ask questions is, and in my email to Mr. Morris, it was asking him which committee would be best, infrastructure or council, and the email trails shows that it was agreed that I come to this committee and ask those questions.
Yeah, so you're trying to get some clarification around costs?
It's about where it goes to. Okay, there's a cost associated, but like with the legal fees, I'll come to that next, but I thought I'd start first with operation advice. Now, 337,000, and this is quite relevant because after this meeting, we have the extraordinary council meeting to talk about either cuts and stuff to the annual plan, and we're talking in figures of 70,000 there now for some of the items. So this is extremely relevant in how money is assigned and appropriated. So
yeah, bearing in mind that when you do big projects like this, there is cost. So
absolutely, and so when it's listed as museum operation advice, what does that mean? I mean, to me, it means someone telling me how to read my watch as far as run a museum goes. So I'm just asking museum operation advice.
So you're wanting some clarity on specific labels of cost within the...
I mean, absolutely. Why did we pay someone or some organisation $337,000 to give us advice on how to operate a museum?
Okay.
So that's my first question.
Yeah, yes. So, as you well know, so you'll put up the things that you want to find out from the notice of motion. If it's successful, then we'll put the notice of motion up, see if it gets supported and goes through, and then the staff would take away what your questions, concerns are and come back with a paper.
Okay, right. I can accept that. So that's the first question. Do you want me to say it again, or have you got that?
No, got that.
If you can say it again, Councillor, so we can record it for your notice of motion on the screen, that would be helpful.
Okay.
Sorry, what was that?
If you can say it again, so we'll record it on the notice of motion, so then the staff have got a record and the meeting's got a record of what you're after.
Okay. The question is, there is a line titled Museum Operation Advice, and it comes to a total of $337,927, and my question is, what actually is museum operation advice? What do you get for that?
So clarification around the
what does it mean?
title.
Okay, so that's the
first one.
Second one is legal services. It comes to a total of $249,519. Now, with legal services,
so you're wanting clarification. I suspect there's a bit of a list here, so for time, I'm just trying to move things forward. So you're wanting clarification around that cost?
Sorry?
You're wanting clarification around that cost?
Okay, and I can be
legal costs?
I can be quite quick and specific on that. Was any of the money used in litigation? Okay, that's a question that someone can take away. So litigation means...
Yeah, we all know what litigation means.
Okay, cool, that's good. Okay, was any involved for mediation? What was involved?
So you want clarification around what that legal cost was associated with?
Yeah, and it can be quite specific because there are, when you're securing titles on the Queen's Park land, maybe things needed.
So you want clarification around that. Thank you. Next one.
And the next one is experience fit-out design. Now, this one might be a bit more difficult. It shows up till the end of the 2024 year, which ends in June 2024, there was 387,000 spent on experience and fit out. Now, obviously, we all know in July last year we approved an extra $13 million.
No,
What I'm
no,
asking-
no, it wasn't July. Not for the experience.
July last year?
No, so you're talking about the increase in budget for the
No,
experience?
no, no, no.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that in July last year, we approved an extra $13 million
Oh, right, okay, just for the museum project.
for the museum project,
Okay,
and
yep.
we were told it was for the experience. We were? I'm right with that? Is that right?
Oh, I haven't.
It
think it
wasn't
was-
just the overall project, it was because...
No, no,
we
so
were-
I think you are a little bit confused there. So we went to the public, did a consultation and asked them for an increased spend on the experience in October, but we did increase the budget for the museum in July, and that was largely due, but Patricia's probably going to help me out here, largely due because we signalled at the time that we hadn't received the funding we thought we would get from government. So we came back to the committee and back to council and said, look, we're flagging this, we haven't received that information. So that was the money in July that, and what I'm linking to is, if your question is related to the increased spend on the experience, that was part of the consultation in October. So are you still in July or are you moving to October?
No, well, the key thing is that up to the end of June last year, we spent $387,000 on fit out and design.
Okay.
Okay, we did.
Yeah, so you want to know what that's about?
No, I want to
You don't
know
wanna know.
why, after you've spent $380,000, you finally realise that you don't have enough money to do the fit out and design, and ask for more.
Well, you're drawing a long bow there.
No, seriously,
Well, you are.
because a sizable part of that increased $13 million is attributed to fit out and design.
Well, I think what we need,
Fit out.
what you're looking for
Experience,
is some clarity around what specifically the $13 million was for, and then what the $387,000 for fit out and design was related to.
Well, I think
That's what you're asking, isn't
well,
it?
my memory serves me that the increase in the 13 million was because basically we forgot about the experience.
Well, that's an assumption you're making, so let's stick to what you're trying to understand, and you're trying to understand what the $13 million increase was for and what was the 387.
And then my final question is why the experience design was not done first and then the building designed appropriately to make that work. So my question is, why did they design a building first and then try and fit an experience in it? I think that's a reasonable question.
So, yeah, so you're just wanting to know the phasing of the sort of decisions, really.
Yeah, because it's obvious from what I see.
Well, I don't know if you can use the word obvious.
Well, no, it's obvious to me, but it's my opinion
Yeah.
that this project has been done arse about face. That's my opinion.
Well,
Is
caution
that
your
we-
language, please.
Well, sorry, back to front. Sorry, I'll use less colloquial saying.
Thank you.
So my opinion is that council has built a building and then all of a sudden realised, we've got to put an experience in it. Whereas I would have assumed that you do the experience concept first, what you want to achieve, and then what do we want to build to make this work. So that's
Cool.
that's my question.
Thank you. So we have questions around it before we need to move the motion. Yeah, so do we have a seconder for Councillor Pottinger's motion? So you just want to scroll up or down so we can see. So we're receiving the motion.
So, Mr Chair, you've got, received the motion. The resolution there, there's three that's got the line through it, would be replaced by those specific questions because the wording in 3 was simply asking for that information. We've now spelt that out, what specifically Councillor Pottinger is seeking
Yep.
with this notice of motion.
Yeah, okay. And so it's seconded by Ria, so we'll leave that on the table for discussion or comment.
Right.
So we've got Mayor Clark, then we've got Alex, and then Leslie, and then Darren. Mayor Clark and then Trish.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to reflect on what I've heard in the last 5-10 minutes.
Can you talk into your mic, please,
Sorry,
Mayor Clark?
just wanted to reflect on what I've heard in the last 4 or 5 minutes. We made a conscious decision very early on in the process to not do one single project, to do the build. We had a lot of discussion about how big the build was. In fact, if you remember when we went to public consultation, we talked about the square metres and how big it would be. Then we, as a second option, decided that we'd do the fit out afterwards and make it futuristic on a 70 to 30 process. I have to say, it comes at a reasonable level of frustration that I sit here and hear these questions today. The councillor has had, by my assessment, in the last 6 or 7 months, at least 4 meetings where we've discussed the ongoing increases, and we've gone out to public consultation on that. In 3 of those 4 meetings, he's been an apology. But the main meeting was the one on the 30th of July. And if you read through the minutes of the 30th of July, it's probably the longest set of meetings on any single topic that I've seen, about 4.5, 5 pages on the museum issue alone. And interesting, we had 8 recommendations in that document that we had to accept. Councillor Pottinger only opposed 1 recommendation. Be mindful that the last recommendation was actually to sign the build, which was for Naylor Love's contract to be signed by the Chief Executive. The only one he opposed was the resolution to consult with the public. So it's a bit ironic now, as the build is getting fairly close to being finished, and we're now trying to firm up what we will have by experience, to be really going backwards on all these issues. We've been out to the public and consulted. The public came forward and said they didn't want the Green Star watered down. They didn't want the car parking watered down. The general message we were getting was, get it done, don't cut corners, it's a 50-year project, make sure you complete it like you originally designed it. There's been opportunities for the council to be involved with those all the way through, and he's been an apology. So that's...
Just a point of order there, the Mayor is incorrect in stating what he has. I voted against the increase in $30 million.
Well, I'll speak to that if you tolerate that, Chair. On the 30th of July 2004, that's the long meeting where we discussed all these issues, pages and pages and pages of minutes, and he only voted against 1 of them. He had plenty of opportunity there. 6th of August, another meeting, apology. We had issues in there. 22nd of October, extraordinary council meeting to deal with those issues that became urgent. The meeting only discusses the museum and the museum only. He's an apology again.
Point of order.
No.
I was in the United States of America, and my apology was noted for that very reason. So,
Hang on, listen.
Point of order. Point of order. This is getting personal from the Mayor against me.
If you let me speak, I'm going to pick it up.
Sorry, Chair. You need to act as a chair.
So I'm just about to, if you give me the chance, and be respectful, please. So we're not going to get into a tit for tat here, right?
Correct.
We've put the motions on the table. You've clarified them very clearly for the meeting, and thank you for doing that. So the Mayor has made a point of you've been absent from those meetings, okay? That you were absent. That's all that's been stated, right?
I think he was inferring something else.
You've assumed what he's inferring. He's made a point that he's thinking, but I will actually make sure that we do keep this at an appropriate, respectful level, please. So, and that's to all punters, not just Mayor Clark or Mr. Pottinger.
Well, final comment to that, Chair.
Yep.
The councillor was not in America from the 6th of August till the 29th of October. So we had meetings all the way through there. And if you don't want to contribute at the time we had them, these were extensive meetings. It's a bit rich to come back at this late stage in an election year and to do politics.
Yeah, so let's just keep those comments.
Sorry, point of order again.
Yeah, I've just pulled it up, so just relax. Who we got next? Alex.
No, I'm just going to leave this, thanks. I'd rather
Leslie. You're next.
Sorry,
Sorry, you're
no, sorry, I thought there were a few other people in front of me.
They've pulled out.
Okay. So I suppose, as I'm qualified in a sister field to this particular field, I'm going to comment on 2.4. Why is building design completed before experience design? Basically, you need the size of your building and some idea of what you are building square meterage wise before you take on any such project. And certainly in the field I'm qualified in, and I believe in this field also, you do not have one experience forever and a day. You do actually have experiences that change through the time of your building, which may have been built for a 50 to 100 year time frame, during which your experience is going to change. You need to have planned a square meterage and facilities such as your AV projections or the movability of your walls or the sort of structural shelving and plinths and whatever else you are going to put in your building, and the actual structure of your building. So if your building is going to have an entrance foyer and a welcoming area or a cafeteria or whatever, you need to have actually factored your building design very carefully before your experience design. So I'm not quite sure what can be drawn out by 2.4 except to say it would be a normal practice to have your building design pretty much cut and dried before you actually got to your detailed experience design. On the other matters, look, museum operational expenses, we're well aware even with a closed museum that we had some operational experiences that had to continue. Even a minimum staff.
Sorry,
during the
again,
time,
a point
it's-
of order. You have stated that these are to be voted on, whether we accept them.
Hang
and they
on,
go
no,
away
no,
for-
no,
I'm just repeating what I was told, that these questions
No.
would go away. What we're
No,
getting
no,
now
listen,
is
stop.
answers.
No, you need to respect me as chair, right? So,
I am, sorry, but I'm
so-
just repeating what you
so
said.
what I'm allowing to happen is I want people, and I said this at the start, we've had a seconder, right? So the motion is now up for discussion. As we do in a number of these committees and even in council, we have a discussion around the table, we hear people's perspective, and then we put it to the vote, right? I'm happy for it to run that way. I think this is an important issue. I'm giving the importance you would like me to give it to, but I'm interested in what other councillors have to say. That's why I'm allowing people to speak to what you've asked for.
So my question,
so
sorry,
by-
I'm just saying, are these opinions or are these the official answers?
People are speaking to them, and I will monitor them. I'll take your note. If it goes too far, I will pull them up. But I'm happy with what I'm hearing so far. They're trying to clarify, and they're also giving their experience, as Councillor Soap has just talked about, what their perspective is and thing. And that's important for this discussion, so I'm going to keep going. Thank you.
Okay, so
Point
my
of order-
summary
point
on
of
the
order, Chair.
museum operational expense matter is that at any point in this process, even with a minimum museum operational staff, which we know we had at some of the point after the museum was closed, there had to be some expert operational advice given in this project from a museum expert. I would have expected that as a professional in a related field. I would have been very surprised if we hadn't had that operational advice, and in fact, when I look at the figure, it doesn't particularly surprise me for the length of time we're talking about. Those are just comments on two of those issues.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry. Mayor
So,
Clark.
Chair, I've got a point of order as well. So, we've got to stop this interjecting when other people are speaking. I mean, I sat and listened to Councillor Pottinger for about 10 minutes. Councillor Soper is also giving her view, which she's entitled to give.
Yeah, and that's the point
And-
I've made.
But the member over here keeps interjecting. He says point of
so
order,
let's
it
just-
stops the conversation, but he
Yeah,
doesn't abide by standing
yeah, so
orders,
let's
which
just
requires...
Let's just stop chucking the
No,
tennis
I'm
ball
just
back.
saying.
Yeah,
if-
I've heard your
If you
point.
want to lodge a point of order...
Yeah, I agree.
You have to clarify on what
I
point
agree.
of order you're doing it. You just can't interject.
Okay, I agree. So let's stop lobbing. Trish.
I have a question about these consultancy costs, and Patricia, thank you very much for getting them to us. I found them really useful. and you pulling it to our attention was also useful. I went through these for the project 1225, and it seemed to me that we've spent about 130,000 on quantity surveying or surveying. Could we possibly, is there a way that we could review how we do this in the future? I don't know whether that's relevant for this discussion, but it is relevant to costs. Is there a way we could have somebody on site, on council, that was competent to do that? Or it just seems to be a lot of money to pull specialists in to do this.
So you're talking about surveying or quantity
Yeah,
surveying?
and I don't know whether you have to have...
No, to clarify, because they're different fields completely. So you're talking about surveying or quantity surveying?
A bit of both, a bit of both.
Right,
Quantity surveying was 97,000.
Yeah, so I mean, to address that point, surveying is a very specialist skill.
Right.
So I don't see that we would
Okay.
have the demand within council to have a surveyor sit within our employment. And
Okay.
equally, I would say, a QS, a quantity surveyor, is also a very specialist skill that sits outside of, council, and while we may have a need, I think on this project, because we do have an outside QS who is very experienced, it gives a level of comfort, certainly for me as the council lead on this, around that independent view of sort of things. So,
Sorry, Chair, I just think it may just be helpful to the discussion that not everybody who's involved in project management understands the role of a QS.
So
That it's not a physical on-site
no.
role, it is as a financial
Yeah.
role around the financial management of the role, and essentially it's the person managing the cost of the project.
Yeah, so it's the bean counter, but it's specifically related to the cost of the build. So all the concrete and all the inputs and all that are quantified.
Yep.
And then
Can I just make a statement then? I think that if that's the case, if we don't have it, or it shouldn't be on site, that we have to just wear these costs for this thing, because if we can't, and I wasn't saying we should have it now, but if it was possible, we should consider it. But if it's not, then the costs are valid and true.
yeah, and I think that if you have the opportunity to read through the paper that I've put round,
Yes.
what it talks about is the specialist nature of some builds,
Yep.
and this build is a very specialist build,
Yep.
right? And so you need to bring in specialists, and that's why costs can be higher on these types of projects because of the nature of the build and the specialisation required to bring or contract in. So,
Thank you.
yeah. Tom.
So I think, Chair, what your paper, or whoever wrote this paper, does show, certainly aligns with my own experience of project management, that number around 10–11% is an appropriate sum to assume. Bearing in mind that when we say consultant, people imagine that those are individuals who are providing you advice, but in fact, the way that we categorise consultant includes services, so it includes geotechnical work, it includes design work, it includes architecture work.
Yeah.
So I think when you sum those together, when you include those, then that kind of number of 10–11% is about what I would expect. Now, having said that, I think the first three questions on the list that Councillor Pottinger has given are entirely transactional questions and quite easy to answer, and I think appropriate to answer. So I would certainly support that we bring back answers to those. 2.4. I mean, I would just question whether that is worth stuff going away. I mean, essentially, when you're building a museum, you're building a big box that you can put various things in, as Councillor Soper said, over maybe the next 50 or 100 years. So it's essentially, it's going to be a space which is able to have various experiences in. So I don't think you would ever even consider designing it for a specific experience. So I would just wonder if Councillor Pottinger would reflect on that. And because I think if you take 2.4 out of it, then I think the remainder of the list becomes entirely appropriate questions to ask.
Councillor Podger, I'll ask you did you hear the question?
Yeah.
So specifically that question around, would you give consideration to removing 2.4 and leaving the other three there? And before you do that, what I take from 2.4 is you're trying to understand the timing of when the decision was made. Is that the wider lens you're trying to take to that particular point?
Well, yeah, the basis around my question was that the approval of the extra money was because the actual experience thing wasn't allowed for, the cost. That's what we were told. Anyway, so I will withdraw 2.4.
Okay.
That's fine, but...
No buts.
Chair,
No, no.
Chair,
Hang on.
can I suggest that it may be more helpful to get to the crux of Councillor Pottinger's question? That I think what you're asking is, what was the reason for the increase in the cost for the experience?
No,
What was it that required
no,
more
my
budget?
understanding is
Okay.
it was just forgotten. So, yeah, that's... But my but is actually a technical thing. 2.1 should read museum operational advice. That's what it's listed in the...
Right,
in the
okay.
thing.
Thank you.
That's,
Yep.
So
that's
Chair,
what
with
my
the
but
removal of
was.
2.4, I would second the, as it sits.
Okay, and you've confirmed you're happy to move 2.4. Well, actually, it comes back to Rhea as the mover, do you? Yeah. So Darren and then Rhea.
Where to start? 2.4's just gone, so I'll not bother to point out it was a decision of council. But it is a chicken and egg situation. But I think the point that Councillor Soper made of the fact that the experience can change and alter means you wouldn't build a building around one experience. Museum operational advice. I suspect part of that answer will come back with scale of operations, because while council under a contract had been operating the museum and operates the temporary facility currently, the scale of the operation is going to change dramatically, and we would need to understand what that's going to be. So I think that'll fill in part of that answer. And I think Councillor Campbell made the other point, which is distinguishing between contractors and consultants. Consultants, I've said this before, is such a sexy word that inspires hatred amongst the general population. As consultants, they're paid lots of money to do stuff that actually we don't have staff on council to do, because there isn't enough work here full-time for those roles to be done. They are specialist roles, but I think Tom made a very good point in isolating out what may have come under consultants for this work, which is actually just contractor work that needs to be done, that is done by people on a temporary basis.
Thank you. Rhea?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted, the reason why I supported Councillor Pottinger's motion for this and these questions was because I had information gaps myself, not having enough clarity or certainty that at different stages that we're moving through the whole transition, that we, hand on heart, completely knew what was going on. So I support question 2.2 because I brought up recently in a meeting what was an update on any mediation under a report that was tabled by Mr. Morris, and we were still waiting for that. So I myself had a few questions. I was away at the time, came back, and I voted against the budget improvement or amendment. And I said I gave my reasons at that time, and they still stand true today. So I just wanted to say that's why I've supported this motion. It just answers questions that you may have.
Yeah. No, fair enough. Okay. Okay. So, Councillor Pottinger, is there anything you want to add, given you've heard the discussions?
Yeah, I was waiting for the bit where you get to speak first and get to speak last.
So you've got that right, so don't abuse it.
Let me count the words. No, I think enough has been said, and I appreciate the time given by council to allow me to speak. So you may proceed with your chairman role.
Yep, thank you. Okay, so we have a mover and a seconder to receive the notice of motion and ask for a report from staff to the next meeting. And I suspect that's sufficient time, just looking to Patricia, because it's probably going to come through Jamie and Patricia. So that'll be sufficient time, thank you. To provide additional information specifically related to point 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3. There's nothing below that, so I'll put that to the committee. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? Do you want that recorded?
Thank Thank you.
Mayor Clark's against. Okay, it passes. So we'll look forward to receiving that report at the next infrastructure meeting.
Sorry, excuse me, it's probably just appropriate that it's noted that I wasn't. So Dylan and I wouldn't.
Yep, we will record that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that being the end of the public portion of the infrastructure and projects meeting, we'll move to public excluded for the reasons as outlined in the papers. Thanks, Leslie. Thanks, Darren. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Just breathe for 30 seconds.